In this pot, I have a soup that you're gonna wanna make all year round. It's Pozole Rojo, and it's a soup that is out of this world. I love making this soup on the weekends. It lasts you all week, and it's also a great recipe to have on hand when you have family get-togethers. We'll start off with making a broth from scratch with pork. Then I'll show you how the red sauce comes together with some dried peppers, and then we're gonna simmer it low and slow.
Starting with the broth, I've got about 4 pounds of pork shoulder with some nice marbling cut into 2 to 3 inch cubes, along with some pig's feet. Now, if you've never cooked with pig's feet, trust me, they're a must for a good pozole. They're loaded with collagen, which gives the broth a silky texture and a rich flavor. You can find these at any local meat shop, or if you're having trouble, you can just find them online. Everything's gonna go into a large pot covered with water. I'm using filtered water for my 5-gallon jugs instead of the tap. It's cleaner, has no chlorine or hard minerals, and gives you a broth that's pure, rich, and all about pork and chilies, not whatever's lurking in your pipes. Next, we're gonna add the aromatics, starting with the onion. I'm cutting almost into quarters to release the flavor while staying intact. This will help you fish out the onion during the next step. Then we're gonna add a whole head of garlic with the top sliced off to let the cloves infuse into the broth. And then we're gonna add in about a half a cup of salt. Bring to a boil and skim off the foam that rises to the top. That's just the impurities, and we don't want any of that in our soup. And then we're gonna cook this low and slow for about 2 hours. The longer it goes, the better the flavor. While the broth is doing its thing, let's talk chilies. This is where the Pozole Rojo gets its signature color and smoky depth. I'm using ancho and guajillo peppers. Ancho for that raisiny richness, and guajillo for a brighter, slightly spicy kick. Toast them in a dry pan for about 30 seconds per side. You're not charring them, just warming them up to wake up the oils. You'll know when they're ready when the kitchen starts smelling amazing. Once they're toasted, simmer them in water for about 20 minutes until they're soft and pliable. Don't skip the soak. If you try to blend these dry, you're gonna burn out your blender motor and your patience. Remove the chilies from the water and pull the stems off one by one. To reduce some of the heat, you'll want to remove the seeds from the chilies. I'm a spicy fan, but pozole isn't meant to be a spicy soup to start. You should have just a pinch of heat, but let each person heat the taste with their garnishes. Toss the chilies in a blender with the garlic and onion that came from the broth and about a cup of water. Blend until smooth. It doesn't need to be perfect since we're straining this later. Just break down the chilies and aromatics to a rich, pourable sauce. Now strain the sauce right into the pot. I know. You might be tempted to skip this, but trust me, straining catches any tough skins and seeds that didn't break down. I like to use a metal strainer, dunking it into the broth to loosen the mixture, then pressing it through with a wooden spoon until all that rich flavor gets into the pot. And once the sauce hits that broth, the color is unreal. Deep red, almost brick-like, and that's when you know you're on the right track. Let this simmer for another hour or two, and this is where the flavors are gonna start really coming together. All right, the pork's been simmering for hours and it's fall apart tender, exactly where we want it. First up, I'm adding hominy. This is what makes pozole pozole. Hominy is a dry field corn that's been nixtamalized, meaning soaked in lime to soften the hull and boost flavor. This process gives it that chewy texture and slightly nutty taste that holds up beautifully in a long simmer. I'm using a canned hominy because it's easy, consistent, and still soaks up all that chili-rich broth. Just drain it, rinse off the brine, and pour it straight into the pot. You could make hominy from scratch, but I'll be honest, that's not something I'm super confident in doing, and it's a lengthy process. Canned works great, and it keeps this whole dish approachable without sacrificing flavor. After about another 30 minutes of simmering, I'm gonna go ahead and shred the pork. It's so tender, it basically falls apart with the fork. You could leave it in chunks, but shredding it will give you that perfect pork to hominy ratio in every bite. Last step here, I'm fishing out the pig's feet. Some people do tend to leave it in, but for me, they've done their job. They've broken down and released the collagen into the broth, giving it that silky texture. You don't need to eat them unless you want to. To me, they're just the flavor workhorses. And with the hominy in, pork shredded, and the broth rich and glossy, this pozole is almost ready to serve. Pro tip, once you've done simmering, turn off the heat and let it rest for another 30 minutes. It's like resting a steak. The broth settles, the flavors round out, and everything just tastes more balanced. And honestly, pozole only gets better with time. By tomorrow, the hominy's soaked up even more flavor, the pork's even more tender, and the broth, it's pure gold. Trust me, it's worth the wait. Now for the best part, serving it up. Ladle that rich, red broth into a bowl, making sure you get plenty of pork and hominy. Top it with cabbage, cilantro, radish, queso fresco, a good squeeze of lime, and your favorite hot sauce.
I got nothing. This is by far the best batch I've ever made. To be honest, this is the third bowl I've had today. I did a batch of chicken for the family, and this was for the video, and it doesn't matter how many times I have this, it's so good.
That first bite is rich, savory, bright, and crunchy. It's everything you want in a comfort dish, and that broth is deep, vibrant, and packed with flavor in every spoonful. So there it is, Pozole Rojo, made from scratch and worth every minute. This just isn't dinner. In our house, it's tradition, comfort, and a little bit of kitchen therapy all in one. If you try this, drop a comment, let me know how it turned out, and if you're into more recipes like this, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more coming your way.